Hello everyone and welcome back to Deckled Edges. I'm your host Camilla and today we are back with another episode. I'm so excited to begin this new chapter with you guys. I know that it has been a while, but we're here with a new format. We're doing video podcasts from now on for the majority, I do believe. And also I'm in a new environment and in my college dorm. But yeah, nothing much has changed. We just are starting a new format. So today we're going to be talking about a really, really incredible book. We're going to be talking about one that is not only a quick read, but it's just so much impact packed into a short and sweet 250 pages. And the book I'm talking about is PIRANESI by Susanna Clarke. Now, this is a really, really intriguing and interesting book, and I think it is just such a force of nature because I think it could appeal to so many different kinds of people. It's not one genre of book. It's just so intriguing, so other from almost every other novel that I've ever read, and I think that makes it just such a universal kind of tome, you know? But so what I'll say about this is that this is a book that places such an incredible emphasis on the feeling of wonder, and that is something that I think that is really necessary to try and capture, not just in literature, but in all forms of media, because I think that's one of the tenets of human existence. Wonder is such a integral part of our lives. It's what actually, beyond just our day-to-day routine, keeps us going, keeps us curious and willing to learn and know more. And at least for me, that's one of the things that I value the most in this world, this idea that I can be filled with enough wonder to want to constantly seek knowledge, to want to constantly know more at risk of life and limb, to fill myself with as much knowledge and observation of this world and this universe as possible. And I think that that's something that we can often be led to lack in our lives. I think that in society we have a very self-centered approach sometimes because it's just how we've been conditioned to think. We've been conditioned to think to put ourselves in a position to succeed and in a position to follow along the predetermined paths for us. And often that means sacrificing parts of ourselves that we would rather not sacrifice and that maybe we don't even know are gone. And part of that, I believe, is wonder. We have this wonder as a child. A lot of people talk about childhood wonder and how to really capture that and get back to that. But I say to that, it never really left us in the first place. It's within us all. And even today, I took a nap outside and it was glorious. It was wonderful. And to just be able to sit in the sun and let the warmth seep into my bones and realize that it's a beautiful day and the wind provides a cool breeze through my sleeping self just out in the world. And then when you open your eyes after a long time of being in the dark, it's like seeing the world with a whole new light. And I highly recommend sleeping in nature because even if it's just under a tree, you open your eyes and immediately you're privy to so much beautiful activity in this world. You start to notice the shifting of the trees, the way the light scatters upon the grass, and the way it filters through the branches of a tree to fall upon the pathway. And you see the bugs, you see them playing with each other and pollinating, and you realize that there's so much life in this world that we don't notice because we're so busy thinking about ourselves and thinking about our grand scale worries, when so much of what makes this life meaningful is the things that we don't notice on a day-to-day basis. So anyway, highly recommend. But that's also part of what makes this book so special, because hold for the bus. That's also part of what makes this book so special, because we're plunged into this different world with this character who's saying so many foreign things. It's so confusing. It makes no sense, realistically, but we're there, we're in it, we're present in the moment, and we don't even have time to be confused. We just have time to read. We have we when you read this book, you're all in with PIRANESI. You are so, like I said, you're so confused. You don't understand the thing that's going on, but you're sucked in to his reverence, to his wonder for this beautiful world that he's living in, even though he is lost. He doesn't know much about it, but what he does know is what he's been able to gather, his observations, his methods, his habits that he's formed. It's a one-person society, and he is just so deeply in awe and in love with it. He believes that this world provides for him, and it does. And it's just this tremendous gratitude that we have never really, at least now, are unable to reach that level because we simply know too much. And it's honestly an interesting thought to think that so much of our time is spent knowing things and having knowledge at our fingertips. We have almost the entirety of human knowledge at our disposal in some form or another, at least at a basic level, but never, so few times in our modern society, in our day-to-day lives, do we really let ourselves be confused. How often do you sit down and encounter something that you know nothing about and just let yourself sit in the confusion before and try to figure it out, and just try to sit down and look at it as it plainly is without comprehension. Look at something, a concept, an idea, an object, a piece of art, a piece of media, and just really absorb it through your senses without turning on or without seeking immediate gratification of an answer. And there's nothing wrong with seeking answers. That's so much of being human, is seeking knowledge and learning and having the desire to understand the world around us. But also, on the other hand, there needs to be an equilibrium of being confused isn't inherently bad. Allowing yourself to delay the gratification of an answer for the instant, or delay the instant gratification of an answer for the experience of sensation, is something that I think that we should all take a page out of Piranesi's book from. And just really seeing his reverence for the world is something that I think anyone and everyone can benefit from, because you can apply it to your life, and it's a very powerful realization to have. So, some examples of this are to give context to. Piranesi, he lives in this world that he calls the house. And the book opens with this line. The book opens with the line, when the moon rose in the third northern hall, I went to the ninth vestibule to witness the joining of three tides. This is something that happens only once every 8 years. Automatically. It makes no sense. And so this is what this entire first half of the book is like. You sit in your confusion because there's no answers to be found. A lot of times in modern literature, answers are just around the corner. Even if you have to wait, oftentimes something relevant is revealed within the next chapter. And very few times are we truly forced to sit in this like liminality of between having this world introduced to us and understanding the fundamentals of how the world works. But right now, all we know is what Piranesi knows. And what Piranesi knows is this deep reverence for the world around him. And he's willing to not understand it because he doesn't see a necessity, because all that matters to him is what is. And this reverence presents itself not only in the way he describes the house, but also in the way his gratitude shines through for what it can give to him. It provides food for him, minimal though it may be. He says it provides shelter. It provides everything he could possibly need. And he's willing to live in this state of deprivation because to him it's not deprivation, to him it's sustenance, to him it's everything. And so I think that is the true value of this book, because the first part, you're completely in the dark, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you're experiencing something that is so rare to experience nowadays. So, to continue, there's a lot of statues in this world, and he has favorites. And a lot of what we know and what we learn is based off of his description and his observation. He's such an analytical mind. He's a scientist. He documents everything doggedly, but he doggedly observes and experiences the world. He doesn't do it with the intention of necessarily understanding. He does it with the intention of learning and seeking knowledge, rather than parsing out every last drop of the workings of the world. And I think his mentality stands out in stark contrast to the other. Because Piranesi knows of one other living person in the entire world. And the other person who he knows is called the other. He calls the other. And he knows that the other is conducting a scientific experiment. The other is in pursuit of a great and secret knowledge. He wants to harness this great and secret knowledge to use all the power that the house has to offer for his own benefit. And Piranesi isn't interested in any of this. He doesn't want to do anything for his self-gain, because for him, he already has everything he could ever need. But I think it's also a very interesting comment on our need for connection, because Piranesi desires connection, and his connection with the house is possibly everything he could ever need. But there's something innate in him that recognizes that the company of another human, unfulfilling though it may be, is one of the most crucial parts of being a human. And even though this is maybe a subconscious realization for Piranesi, it still drives him to seek the other out, to have this routine, because he believes that he's helping the other, even though he believes it's a foolish pursuit. So, it's also intriguing, because for the first part of this book, we're in this limbo. We don't know why Piranesi knows certain things and doesn't know others. We can't tell if this is an odd, an odd variation of our world, or if it's something completely separate. But then you have moments where he'll write a journal entry and he'll write, "Do trees exist?" And he's never mentioned a tree before. There's no trees in the house, but he writes that as the title of his journal entry. So we wonder, why? How does he know what a tree is if he's never seen a tree and one doesn't exist in the house? And so, in this entry, he writes, "Many things are unknown. Once, it was about 6 or 7 months ago. How does he know what a month is? I saw a bright yellow speck floating on a gentle tide beneath the fourth western hall. Not understanding what it could be, I waded out into the waters and caught it. It was a leaf. A leaf. Very beautiful, with two sides curving to a point at each end. Of course, it is possible that it was part of a type of sea vegetation I have never seen, but I am doubtful. The texture seemed wrong. Its surface repelled water, like something meant to live in air." And this is significant too, because at this point in the novel, we know that there are three levels of this house. There are the upper halls, which is the clouds and the precipitation and the birds. That's their domain. There's the middle halls, where Piranesi lives. And there's the drowned halls. And that's where he fishes and he bathes. And it's just intriguing to see the way that he interacts with all three of them differently, because he's an explorer. He adventures off further than the other could even fathom. Hundreds of vestibules, and he's seen so much of this world. So much that you begin to think that at some points you're like, how could he not be confused and want to know more about the world he lives in? But he does know more. He's known more. He's been in pursuit of knowing more for years and years and years. But it's just a different kind of knowledge that he seeks. But yes, he's a scientist, and that's also part of why I enjoyed this book, because he's so cutely analytical. He's so anal about the observation. It's incredible. It's like just this masterclass in observation and anecdotes and just veneration of the world around you, which we can all adopt in our lives. But in any case, here he describes an albatross. And I read passages because I think it's important to convey the tone of this book, the way it's meant to be interacted with and read, because I think it really is one of the biggest draws. It's enthralling. That's what it is. And it's not almost rivaled in that unique way that's portrayed. Okay. It's going to be a little bit of a long one, but I think it's worth it. The wind took my breath from me, and all I could manage was, "Come, come." The bird sailed across the heaving waves, never once beating its wings. With great skill and ease, it tipped itself slightly sideways to pass through the doorway that separated us. Doorway. Proper noun, by the way. Its wingspan surpassed even the width of the door. I knew what it was. An albatross. Still it continued straight towards me, and the strangest thought came to me. Perhaps the albatross and I were destined to merge, and the two of us would become another order of being entirely. An angel. This thought both excited and frightened me, but still I remained, arms outstretched, mirroring the albatross's flight. I thought how surprised. Hold for the motorcycles. I thought how surprised the other would be when I flew into the second southwestern hall on my angel wings, bringing him messages of peace and joy. My heart beat rapidly. The moment that he reached me, the moment that I thought we would collide like planets and become one, I gave out a sort of gasping cry. In the same instant, I felt some sort of pent-up tension go out of me, a tension I did not know I had until that moment. Vast white wings passed over me. I felt and smelt the air those wings brought with them. The sharp, salty, wild tang of faraway tides and winds that had roamed vast distances through halls I would never see. At the last moment, the albatross swung over my left shoulder. I fell to the pavement. He flapped his wings in a frantic, panic sort of way, stuck out his wiry pink legs, and tumbled out of the air into a sort of heap on the pavement. In the air, he was a miraculous being, a heavenly being. But on the stones of pavement, he was mortal and subject to the same embarrassments and clumsiness as other mortals. I think these lines are just so beautiful, and it's just a very perfect snapshot of what this book is like, and what it means to me in the sense that that wonder, that veneration for something as simple as a majestic bird is something that I've often felt in my life. I've felt this awe and this quietude that kind of bubbles out of you in moments of silence. This incredible magnificence and veneration for the world around us that if we took the time to notice, we would see many, many miracles. And we would notice many, many miracles throughout our lives. So that's the first part of the book, where we live in this dark, complete confusion, this world of majesty, but also very little answers. And then, in the second part of the book, we find our answers. Now, Piranesi, up until now, like I've said, has been this character of whim and whimsy and reverence and excitement and exploration and imagination, all of these things that we think about in perhaps a vagabond or an adventurer, a scientist, an explorer. But we start to understand that there are incongruencies in the story. There's parts that are missing, puzzle pieces that we've known all along as the reader are missing, but we've been so enthralled in Piranesi's story that we haven't really been cognizant of. We wonder when the other shoe will drop, but when it does, it catches us off guard because we've lived in this fantasy world for so long. And so, what I enjoy about the next part of this book is that the shoe drops for us as it does with Piranesi. And we feel the step a little bit earlier. We understand that we're moving forward before Piranesi does, but we're still uncertain as to what the nature of the footprint will be, if that analogy made any sort of sense. But so Piranesi starts to notice that in his own journals there are inconsistencies, and there's also apparently another human in the world. And up until now, there have only been 15. And he's found the bones of 15, and he cares for these dead as if they're his own loved ones. He talks to them, he brings them lotus flowers, he brings them offerings so that they won't starve. They're bones, really. And so he knows that other humans exist, and as I said, there's one other alive human that he knows the other. But that's it. And so he finds out that the other has heard of a 16th person. And there is, and he continues to refer to this person as 16. And the other says this person is very dangerous and should not be trusted. And it's intriguing because, you know, it doesn't really, like, strike PIRANESI as weird that the other knows that there are other people. Like, how would... But to him, it's so simple. It's, the other is my friend. The other is my only friend. The only person of solidarity I have with me in this world. He's my lab partner. He's my confidant. Even though he doesn't like me very much, he's all I have. And so he says, the enemy of my friend is my enemy. And so he says, I'll stay away. And interestingly enough, we see the seeds of rebellion planted in PIRANESI, because even though he takes everything that the other says at face value, as he learns and as he grows and as he is presented with just overwhelming evidence, we see this resistance to progress, and then we see it give way. And that happens a lot in our lives, and I think it's just an interesting thing to point out that PIRANESI is in many ways detached completely from humanity, and in also many ways he has this innate understanding of human nature that just presents itself in his actions and his words. And yes, that happens to a lot of us. A lot of times we live so deeply in our own minds and in our own worlds that we forget that we do resist when when our ideas are challenged. But eventually, with time, you can learn to amend your worldview and with new perspectives, gain incredibly valuable insights that can totally shift your world. And sometimes throwing your world off kilter is not exactly a bad thing. But it's also complicated, and you see that a lot in this book, that it's not exactly always a good thing either. To live in a state of not just blissful ignorance, but a state of wonder and reverence can be an incredible thing, because it separates you from a lot of the worries and almost unnecessary stressors of our day-to-day lives. But it can also have the consequence of alienating you and almost giving you tunnel vision, an open-minded sort of tunnel vision, where your entire world is this awe-inspiring thing, but you're a little bit derealized and detached. But that's okay. I think there's a balance to be found there, and I think that's a good commentary that this book makes, because at the end, PIRANESI does find his balance. And so, anyway, but he also finds his answers, which is incredibly important, because sometimes it's better to not know, this book really dives into the idea that once you start knowing, there's almost no going back. You can't stop knowing. To follow through on your pursuit of knowledge is an integral undertaking. You need to. And that's what PIRANESI does. And for better or for worse, he's plunged into this entirely new situation, and entirely new worldview and perspective. And obviously it's different because this is a fantasy novel, but these revelations throughout this novel are very human, and they're very applicable throughout our lives. So, I'm trying to find a balance between talking about the content of the book and not spoiling it too much. But I will say that this being a fantasy novel, we're taken on a journey with these characters. And what I would say about the characters is that because PIRANESI knows so little about himself, it remains the characterization remains a little bit surface level. But in my opinion, I don't think it's a detriment of the book, because I don't think you read this book is necessarily about the character more than the character. And I said the same word twice, but to explain what I mean. When you read a very character-centric book, which you could argue this is, a lot of the time the emphasis is placed on complexity, completely fleshed out stories where the characters are the way they are because they interact a certain way with other people, their communities, and the world. And in this case, we only have one character, really. We have multiple, but in the beginning, only one. And he doesn't have anyone to shape his character. And so it might seem like the character is a little more surface level, a little less complex, but in reality, he's not. In reality, that's just all he knows. And so the more he learns, the more his ideas are challenged, and yes, that makes him a complex character, whether or not it's a complexity that we're used to seeing. It's a different form. But anyway, I will say, like, this book is more so about the way things unfold and not necessarily about how the people themselves change, except for Piranesi. So yes, that's what I will say. And then also I will say that at the end, there's just this culmination of oddities. It's odd. This book is odd. But it's so enjoyable because you see perhaps vengeance be had. There's this judgment and justice that we get by the end of the novel. But within that, it doesn't feel like a cliche because there's this sense of loss in Piranesi. And we're led to regard this situation with a different kind of complexity than we have before. And I've been saying complexity a lot, but that's not truly what I mean. What I really mean is, by the end of this book, we see this justice for the crime, or for a wrongdoing, come to fruition. But, like I was saying, there's this sense that something was changed fundamentally that could never be changed back. And whether or not it was like a net good or a net bad, the fundamental shift that occurred, specifically in Piranesi, altered him to the point where he could never be the same, and that the justice, maybe to the reader, is a somewhat satisfying ending, but to Piranesi, it didn't mean anything. He felt these wrongdoings for his former self. He felt these wrongdoings for this other person who he's had to adopt into himself, because now he's not only one, he's two, and he's two merged into one. And so, yes, maybe he's in effect the same, but a process has occurred. There's always this one post that I really like to reference, where someone, I think it's on Tumblr or something, I don't know, I saw it somewhere, and someone says, like, multiplies you by one, and then the second person says, oh no, I'm exactly the same, but a process has occurred. And I think that just makes so much sense, because that's so much of what we are. We are just people who are fundamentally the same, but with every process that occurs to us, every conversation, no matter how small, every interaction, every experience that we have, we're fundamentally changed. A process has occurred to us, and we can never be the same even though we're exactly the same. Does that make sense? I hope so. But yes, so that's what I love about this book. I think it's just like, it's not as cut and dry as injustice, justice, completion. It's injustice, a fundamental change. Justice, another fundamental change. And to that point, it's, how do you reconcile that? We're left with this feeling that perhaps there will be an eventual reconciliation, but it won't be an easy road, and it will be a very personal and difficult journey, and we're left considering whether it was better if Piranesi continued to live as he did. And so it's this big, like, kind of ignorance is bliss kind of question, but it's just so beautiful. And I think the way it's done gives us enough about this, like, page-turning intrigue where we really want to know exactly how and when things played out. But we also have a sort of idea of what actually happened, and it's not like the most impossible thing to guess by the end. But it's not about whether it's easy to guess or not. It's about the change. It's about what these events brought upon Piranesi. And I think that's really the pinnacle of this book. It's about what processes can do to a person, and how it's not like good and evil is not as cut and dry. And obviously that's a very cliche, but I don't it's an oversimplification to call it good and evil, but it's just like about the repercussions that actions can have, in a really fantastical, wondrous concept. It's just beautiful. And it's a short book, but it really like sits with you. It lingers with you for a long time. And of course, it's just a kind of a breath of fresh air at the end when you get to see Piranesi interacting with other people and sort of gaining the wings that he wanted in that passage. Because from the beginning we see in him this desire for more, this want for a new life, for a real life. Even though he has one, he just doesn't understand. And it's just this crazy ride. And, you know, to see him really flourish, even though he's changed, is really just it's a beautiful thing. Because he becomes an almost more melancholy version of himself, but he changed for the better and also for the worse. I don't know. It's a lot to consider, and I think it makes more sense when you read the book. But I really, really enjoyed the way that you can see the story unfold before your eyes. You can see the mysteries unfold before your eyes, and it's such this breathtaking book that you shouldn't miss it. You really, really, really shouldn't miss it if you can. Yes. So, thank you all so much for listening and watching. Actually, this time watching. And I'll see you again on the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you go pick up this book and give it a read. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to Deckled Edges. Bye.